It hasn't even been 2 weeks yet, and Starfield is already completely forgotten. This was supposed to be the game of the year. This was supposed to be Todd's next big game. Like I saw certain YouTubers come out and say that like, oh, it has 6 million players concurrently or something like that, right? Like, it's always 6 million with these people. Like, it sold like a bazillion copies. We're not gonna give hard numbers because the hard numbers would be actually pretty disappointing. But like, oh, look at all these Game Pass downloads. Everybody on Game Pass is playing this. Like, there were so many excuses made and so much hand wringing and so much like narratives being pushed that I think a lot of people like didn't really catch on to the obvious that I was calling out months ago, that the game wasn't going to do very well. It was never going to be the next Skyrim. It was never going to be successful. It was never going to live up to the hype, the legacy, like the Todd's dream game. Like the lies will finally become reality in Starfield. In fact, people were denying that like Todd Howard and Pete Hines were lying about the game at all. Like I saw so many people like damage controlling for Todd Howard. Oh, why would he lie about that? What game has ever come out that was ever what spacefaring game has ever been promoted on lies? That's never happened before. No Man's Sky. Like that is a completely alien concept to us YouTubers who are too young to have lived through like the No Man's Sky and Skyrim hype cycles. It's like you're you're completely delusional. You don't know what you're talking about, right? There were too many people who were religiously defending Todd, religiously defending Starfield, defending Bethesda, defending Xbox, right? Defending PC. Because this is like one of the only games this year that like people honestly believed could have had a shot at becoming game of the year. Like this is the only game. This is the best the industry could do at like propping up something that could like dethrone Tears of the Kingdom, right? This is the best they have. You know, this like there's no competition going into Game of the Year season. Like Baldur's Gate 3 has been forgotten, Starfield has been forgotten, like Hogwarts Legacy, like people don't even remember it came out this year, right? Like Forspoken was a joke, Hi-Fi Rush was a joke. Like what are they going to do? Like it's going to be a really crazy year going into Game Award season because like this is gonna be one of those years where like Nintendo dominates a bunch of genres that the industry doesn't really want them to tackle. Real time strategy. Like I saw like Angry Joe last year like spurg out over Mario Rabbids, like winning like best strategy game over Warhammer 3 or whatever, which to my understanding is like a broken glitchy mess even today, right? I was he spurred out about that. Like, imagine how bad it's gonna get when like Pikmin 4 wins that award. Like, imagine how bad it's gonna be when like Tears of the Kingdom wins Game of the Year. Like, imagine how bad it's gonna be when like the Mario movie beats out The Last of Us for like best video game to film adaptation. Right? There's no way it doesn't. Right? Like, if it does, if The Last of Us does win, it's just gonna be like more proof of it's just gonna be proof of nepotism, right? Because the Last of Us by no means was as popular or successful as the Mario movie, even if like people are in denial about it. Like it just wasn't a very good adaptation, right? Um, like the Mario movie was. I'm curious, like how if the industry is gonna like bend over backwards trying to like appease the third parties, trying to appease PlayStation, Naughty Dog, like Sony, like whether they're like try and like downplay Nintendo games or if they're gonna be forced to kneel and have to acknowledge that like yeah, Nintendo stomped this year. They put out the best remakes, they put out the best new entries and like classic IPs. They put out like great titles all year long. We have like Mario Wonder isn't even out yet, right? Like we have all this stuff coming out in the near future, and I just can't imagine that like anything other than like maybe best fighting game, like uh, it's gonna be a blowout for Nintendo. All the big relevant like genres that like everyone cares about, like it's all going to Nintendo, right? Like I don't think they'll be able to justify it this year. Like they can't really justify like not giving Zelda stuff because of how popular it is. It's if the Game Awards ever loses its credibility, like it's just gonna implode upon itself. So I think it's gonna have to give everything to Nintendo for that reason, right? Like I just don't. I don't see them putting like Baldur's Gate 3 ahead of Zelda, right? Because Baldur's Gate 3 isn't that relevant. Like they just won't be able to get away with it, no matter how much like the establishment wants it to happen. It's just gonna fall flat out on its face. Or at the very least, like if they push Baldur's Gate 3, it would just lead to Zelda fans making fun of it. Honestly, like I think that's the exact opposite of what they want. So I uh, I think that I think they're gonna have to give it to Zelda. I think they're gonna have to like acknowledge Nintendo in a reasonable capacity this year, and they have been doing better at that over the past couple of years. You know, Metroid Dread won Best Action Game at one point, like in 2021. Like there were there have been like real Nintendo W's over the past couple of years. So like I'm not sure why people think it's like such an alien concept that like Zelda could win Game of the Year, that like Starfield could lose, that Baldur's Gate 3 could lose, right? There's so many people right now that are like acting like it's a given that Baldur's Gate 3 is gonna win when that game just isn't relevant enough. When the most you have like to promote your game is like the Metacritic score, it's not, and that's not relevant. So like it's Starfield's failing is an interesting situation because I think this is kind of the first major step to like Bethesda's decline, right? This was a game that was in production like before the acquisition. So I think a lot of like the aspects of this game were kind of like unmolested by Microsoft, but going forward, we're going to see them like heavily involved in everything that Bethesda does, right? We're going to see them like micromanage everything and control everything and make sure it panders to like the widest possible audience. And in the end, it's going to appeal to no one. Right, that is what we're gonna see from Bethesda going forward. This isn't just about Starfield, okay? Like Starfield failing is irrelevant. Like we all knew it wasn't gonna be that big of a deal. Like the thing that's really gonna kill them is that like Bethesda is never ever gonna recover from this. Like never again are people going to like look at Bethesda games as being like the biggest open world settings in video games. Like now people are going to look at Nintendo. People are going to look at like more Rockstar stuff. People are going to like start moving away from Bethesda and start supporting like other titles that do the same thing but better. Right, Bethesda is on its way out, and it's in the early stages of that. Like Skyrim was super popular, so like a lot of people are gonna be clinging on to that for a long time. I saw a lot of people who were like disappointed with Starfield, like saying that they would just go back to Skyrim, right? So I imagine those people for like next 10, 20 years or so will like be somewhat invested in Bethesda, but they're gonna slowly just drift away over the next several years. Like less and less will people be paying attention to their press conferences, believing Todd's lies, like being excited for the next release because they know it's always the same. It's always the same with Bethesda. They are not a studio that can be trusted.